All right, and with that, I believe, Rebecca, thank you so much for wanting to share an inspiration.
Thanks so much. Again, thank you, Lynn, for the invite. Thank you for collecting these stories. And Mr. Hrbek, I'm just honored to be here and be in your space and to have been able to read your story. Thank you for your willingness to be interviewed for 25 hours. You know, I just, this is so inspiring to be engaged in this journey as a 41-year-old person to get to meet and get to hear the stories of our elders in our community. And I feel like that's tremendously important. So I wanted to thank you for that. Thank you for your life lived and just the willingness to share stories with us. I hope we do a better job going forward of making sure that we continue to prioritize that. And I think the thing that is just like kind of humming in my body is something that your dad said to you early on in the story when he was trying to explain to you Jim Crow laws. And he said that it was wrong, that it needed to change, and it was going to change. And I think so much of what I hear these days is that this will never change in our lifetime. And it is such a hard thing to hear. And I just like reading that, like I'm almost getting emotional, like thinking about like your dad just being like, this is going to change, like we're going to do it. And that's really inspiring. And I could see that all throughout the rest of your story, how you believed that that would change and you put your body and your mind and your heart and your spirit into all of that. And I'm just really grateful for that.
Thank you. The next person that has their hand raised, and if people, once again, at their reactions, wherever it is on your screen, there's a button that you could push there to raise your hand and join us. The next person who's raising their hand is my mom, Joy Elmore. So Mom, go ahead and unmute yourself. Mom, you're still muted, Mom.
I want to thank you, George, for the privilege of getting to know you as you were talking with Lynn. I was struck most by the humility that you shared in each and every one of your stories. And at the end of the story that you said that you had lots of medals, but they were all tucked away in a box in the basement. And that it wasn't really the story of you, but it was the story of all of the people who had worked with you throughout your long ministry. So thank you, George, and thank you, Lynn, for sharing with me too.
All right, thank you, Mom. Michael, and I believe you're a friend of George's. Michael is
Okay. I moved to Cleveland in 1990 and didn't get to meet George for at least 5 years. So I've known the more Cleveland George, and I've come to love him. We met through the theater that he and Stephanie started, but we've come to be good friends. I was brought up in the South. I never thought I was prejudiced, but when I became an adult, I realized how much was built in just from observations. And I've been working on it ever since. And George has helped me a lot in terms of being able to change my attitudes and my actions. I loved this program you put together because I learned so much about George long before he came to Cleveland. And boy, George, you were a tough son of a gun, weren't you? Anyhow, George, I've come to love you and I've come to learn from you. And I think I've come to be a better person, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Joe Elwanger, would be an honor to hear from you as well.
Well, I do join the others, Lynn, in thanking you for doing a great job of lifting up some important parts of George's life that a lot of us didn't know. And just a great story it is to be told and to be shared. And I am grateful that I had such a long opportunity, time-wise, to interact with you, George. It started way back in Concordia College, Fort Wayne, and then Concordia Seminary, St. Louis, and then when you were in Selma and I was in Birmingham as pastor, and then when my brother David was at the mansion and you were in Chicago. And the interaction over the years, coming back through Cleveland and staying at your house with my wife and sharing in that part of your story. It's been an interesting, long journey, and I could stop at many points along the way. I definitely want to stop in Birmingham, and I was pastor in Birmingham, George was in Selma. I must say that Janet, you and your parents, and George's parents obviously too, were indeed some very honest and forthright people who broke the black system, the white system of keeping blacks in their place. And you and your family were the one white family in Birmingham that came to the congregation that I was pastoring, which was African American. And it was a relationship that went over the years, but it just shows the honesty that George and his father and his parents showed. It was not something that was there one day and gone the next. It was a very consistent determination to recognize all people as worthy of association, worthy of accompaniment. And so I really appreciate your whole family and the witness that they have made. We were joking before we started here, Janet and I asked her, have you transformed Birmingham? And then George countered back, well, the great thing is that Birmingham hasn't transformed Janet, and that's for sure. And when I think about what you did in Selma as pastor of a white congregation back in the 60s, and what I did in a black congregation in the 60s, in many respects, it was easier for me to do what I did and participating, for instance, in the demonstrations in Birmingham and in Selma, than it was for you to do what you did, because I came back to a congregation that welcomed me and supported me. You had a congregation, amazingly, that supported you, but your position as a white pastor in the white congregation in the white community of Selma in the 60s was a pretty dangerous position. I think about the the white Methodist pastor who participated in our Concerned White Citizens of Alabama march in Selma the day before Bloody Sunday. And when he went back to his congregation near Calera, he was given a 2-week notice to leave. When Joyce and I went back to our congregation that evening in Birmingham, the women surprised us with a dinner, and the teenager played When the Saints Come Marching Home. Now, what that is the difference between a white pastor in a black congregation at that time and a white pastor in a white congregation. But just to learn about some of the things that happened there in Oklahoma and then in Chicago, and I'm going to wind up, I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but I have to tell you, George, that I talked with my brother David, and I don't know whether you know this. I think Janet and Jean know this, that David is struggling right now with some real memory problems and health problems, and he and his wife are in a care center, and he has difficulty even talking. He's in a serious stage of dementia. So when we manage to talk to him, I always try to remember something from way back that he would remember, and maybe it would jolt his brain a little bit. And sure enough, I told him about this article about you and about the part of the concerning the mansion, and because he was very much a part of that, and you helped to shape some of his really strong and liberal and progressive attitudes and understanding of the gospel that pulled him all the way through his life. So thank you for that. And I asked him a question, and he wasn't able to answer it, so I'm going to ask you the question. You know, in the article, it says that when you had your heresy trial there in Chicago, because of the stuff that you were doing and reaching out to the Black community and to the resistant community, you were on trial there by your peers, and you said there were something like 31 in the group.
That's right. 31 suits and collars,
And
all but one white.
And one African-American pastor, right?
Right.
And
No, he was a police commander.
Oh, he was the police commander.
Right.
Oh, well, he was the one who stood up and clapped at the end of the session.
Actually, Joe, he stood up and said, I've been looking for somebody like you in the church all my life.
All right. Well, you've answered my question, because that was the mystery person. And I asked David if he knew who he was. And of course, he didn't know. And Tom Noon, who is one of my successors in Birmingham, you know, and who's still living in Birmingham, but retired, he read the article. I sent it to him, and he asked me, who was that Black pastor? He thought it was a pastor. And so I couldn't give him an answer, but I'll tell him now. It was a Black policeman in Chicago. How did he get to be a part of? Was he a member of a Lutheran church there?
He was a member of a Lutheran church, right?
Well,
right. He was on the council of the district, right?
Well, that is fascinating. Anyway, that was the one question I wanted to definitely ask you about. But what you did in Cleveland when you wound up there is really amazing and fantastic, all kinds of things. And it's been a joy to stay with you and learn about some of that and experience some of that with you. And I agree that your methodology of pastoring, walking with people and accompanying people and realizing that we have more to learn from the people with whom we accompany than we have to give. It is indeed the way in which the church and pastors ought to be walking with their people, and especially if they're in a community with folks in a different type of community than the church ordinarily reaches to. So thank you for all of that. And it's a joy and a pleasure, honored to be a part of this sharing this evening.
Joe, I just want to let you know that I've been in touch with Barb and Dave, and I've talked mostly with Barb, but have struggled in making sure that I could communicate and listen to David. He had a struggle, but we have talked.
Yeah, there's some days when he really is able to get out some sentences, but I know that it really hurts him because he's aware enough that he knows that he can't really talk the way he used to. He was quite the talker, and it just gives him a sense of unworthiness, and it's part of the angst that he's going through right now, is that he knows that he cannot really remember and speak the way he wants to, and it really hurts him. So yeah, that's tough.
Joe, thank you so much for sharing, and I might embarrass Joe a little bit by praising him here, but Joe was the single white person who Martin Luther King invited into really high-level talks with President Johnson. And he has a wonderful, deeply inspiring book called Strength for Struggle, which if you're interested in building anti-racist churches, definitely check Strength for Struggle out. We're going to transition into a different part of our gathering here. We're going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes being able to ask George directly big questions that might have arisen for us as we were reading this story. So this will be a moment for the next 15 to 20 minutes where if there were questions that you had, or if there were thoughts that you wanted to express to George as you read this recent piece about him, this can be our time to do that. And once again, if folks could go ahead and raise their hands, that makes it easier. But if you don't know how to do that, feel free just to chime in. All right, Christine Sleater, and actually I'm going to introduce Christine. I'm probably going to embarrass a lot of people tonight by praising them. She's shaking her head no. She's a leading scholar of ethnic studies in the country, and she has many books, but Transformative Ethnic Studies in Schools is a truly excellent book for those of us interested in ethnic studies. So thank you so much, Christine, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a real pleasure to meet you and to be here with you this evening. I work with teachers, and I'm always interested in figuring out how young people come about seeing racism as wrong and deciding to do something about it. And in reading your narrative, one of the things that struck me was their ability to see the humanity in people, no matter who they were, and to just immediately see what was wrong in their treatment, how the people were being treated, and then to want to do something about it. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about where that came from, or how with young people that can be supported.
Well, I mean, I think the story probably made that Lynn did indicated that I was really blessed with a family that was already attempting to address some of these issues way back in the 30s already. And when I talk about the family, I'm not only talking about my mom and dad, but my extended family of grandparents and uncles and aunts. And so they had a tremendous influence on me and great support for me all through the years. So I have to really recognize that I was really gifted by them. They were the ones who really made me realize that I needed to be involved, because justice was such a big issue for my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents, my parents, and I didn't know how I was going to do that until I met this pastor when I was about 16 years old, who I didn't know was a pastor. I knew him from the streets, and he had a great influence on me. And I began to see that at least within my understanding of the great mentor in my life, Jesus, that was the course I wanted to follow. I wanted to do it and informed by the teachings of Jesus and what I thought Jesus was about, and what I saw this minister doing. So that's really what started me on the course. And not every young person was gifted the way I was, I don't think. And when I hear young people talk about why they're at where they're at now, most of them have really gone against the grain of the family. And it's been important for them to find the community. At the mansion, we had a lot of people like that came to the mansion who were really struggling with that. And so I think that community is such an important thing, and I think that young people need to relate to, and that's why I think what Lynn is doing is so important, because he's getting out his material to white high school students, college students, and seeing what whites have done, how integrally, how significantly they've been involved in the civil rights movement back in the 50s and 60s, and hopefully see that they're mentors. I've had young people come to me who saw themselves as part of the resistance, and they thought that I had some wisdom to share. Well, I don't know how much wisdom I have to share, but we spent a lot of time on our deck at home, and I listened to them, and I was really encouraged to see, their passion, and they want to become involved in a significant way. But I think it's within the context of community that young people find their strength to be who I think they want to be in the midst of, especially white young people, in the midst of our present situation.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. There were so many times as I was interviewing George where I would ask George questions like Christine just asked, and he would, so many of his answers are listen to people, rather than him giving answers over and over again, like listen, build community, strengthen your relationships. And his sister Janet is going to be next. Janet, what are some thoughts or questions that you would like to share? And you're muted again.
Now, am I okay?
You're good.
Okay. Well, I've known George almost 83 years, which is longer than anybody here. So I'd like to say that everything he says is true. And Lynn did a great job of putting the focus on the white community that George has always done in our family, I think. I grew up in the South where people were saying, well, if Black people would just change, if they would get educated, then we'd feel differently about them. And George always brought the focus back to the white community and educating the white community and making me realize there were two Americas, and I lived in one America and there were people that lived in another America. And it was important for the people in my America to find out what the other America was like. And so I really appreciate what he did as far as educating us. And I was with the panel of American women, which only focused on the white community. We did what George was doing too, which was focusing on the white churches and the white schools and the white police academies. And so I really appreciate what George did and what Lynn did in pointing this out in this well-written article. So, oh, am I supposed to have a question?
No,
Let's George.
thank you.
How did you do that, George? Why did you? I mean, we grew up in the South together where people were criticizing Black people, and it was their fault that they were living like they did.
I didn't grow up in the South like you did.
Right, right.
I was in Birmingham for 2 years, and I couldn't wait to get the heck out of there.
And you left us behind.
But well, I thought I have to say that that I don't know whether I was there right from the beginning or not. This was kind of a learning, an educational process for me. Being in Selma, all the places I were made me realize that the focus needed to be not simply on working together supportively with Black people, with those who were part of the caste, who were the victims of the caste system in this country, but that we needed to deal with the issues that were embedded in the white community, in the policies and practices of the white community. That became the driving thing for me, and so that, which is why I came to Chicago when they said they wanted me to do an anti-racism project. And then I later felt that anti-racism from the institutional church in Chicago was opening up hunger centers for poor Blacks, doing social work with poor Blacks, and which is why I ran into trouble with the church, because I didn't see it that way, and they had difficulty with the relationships I established and so on. But that's always been a thing with me. And even today, I see that, we want to focus on the racists. We want to focus on the racists, and we think if we eradicated all of the people who are racist in this country, that the problem would be solved. Well, it wouldn't be solved, because racism is embedded in the policies and the practices, the history of this country. And, we can talk about a civil war, we can talk about emancipation, we can talk about the end of Jim Crow, but take a look at what's happening today. The evidence is so clear. What's happening in Texas and all of these other states that want to prevent and make it difficult for people of color and poor people to vote. So, that's where we could deal with every racist in the country, and I don't think it would solve the problem.
We've been trying for 2 weeks to get our grandson a non-driver's ID. And I wish you could see what we've had to go through. It is so shocking. You have to have your original birth certificate. You have to have your original Social Security card. You've got to have a picture ID, which you can't get unless you got to have a state picture ID to get a state picture ID. It's just a catch-22. We've been working for 2 weeks trying to get all the documents. And I have friends that are working with the homeless community because they want to vote. And they have to get all these documents so that they can vote. It's just been terrible what we've had to go through. And we still don't have a non-driver's ID for him. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you, Janet. every time I talk to someone who was in the movement, in the civil rights movement, I hear similar stories about not feeling like we have made nearly as much progress as I think some people think we have. Charles Bevel, thoughts or questions that you'd like to share? And after that, we're going to be jumping into breakout rooms for some small group discussions, just so people know. Oh, and Charles, it looks like you're muted right now.
There we go.
There we go.
George, this is the question. I only got as far in the story to the point where you were working with the Latinos in Oklahoma. But this is the question. Your parents, were they preceded by their parents or other relatives before they immigrated to America?
My great-grandfather, and I'm always thankful to the Roman Catholic Church, because if it was not for the Roman Catholic Church, I probably wouldn't be here today, since my great-grandfather was excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church in Bohemia, and that led to him coming with 4 of his brothers to the United States. And it also meant that I was raised in a family that was really intellectually and emotionally anti-institutionalized religion. My grandfather was a Marxist. He was a member of the Communist Party. And so there was this strong social justice belief in the family. My grandfather, I remember my uncles and my grandfather, every Sunday when we gathered at Grandma and Grandpa's house, they were engaged in these discussions, and they were talking about the miners and the condition of the miners and the union movement, and they talked about racism and civil rights and so on. Those discussions were happening, and it fascinated me, and it had a great influence on me as I listened to them. You know, so yeah, so that was my history. In fact, my grandfather put out a newspaper in Czech that went out all across the country. This was a monthly thing. I shouldn't call it a newspaper. In fact, it was mimeographed. But he had a printing press in the basement of his house, and he would, I think he had thousands on that mailing list. And in the 50s, under the McCarthy era, he was raided. He was raided by the FBI, and they confiscated his printing press.
Wow.
But you know, he didn't suffer anything more than that.
Yeah,
I had that whole history behind me, you know. And
yeah, the reason I'd asked the question, it's sort of like it's been my experience that people who immigrate, if they have been preceded by family who after a while learn that being white is more important than their ethnicity, what they will do is that for family coming after them, you know, one of the watchwords as soon as they're off the boat is, don't mess around with Black people.
you know, that's interesting, Charles, because I was raised to believe I was Czech, and I was to be proud of my heritage. I never heard anybody talk about themselves being white. So I was never told I was white, but I was told that I was Czech. And my whole family was Czech.
Okay.
I was raised in a Czech enclave.
All right.
With that culture and that music and so on, but never heard, you know, we were never taught we were white.
All right, I'm going to take one more question here, and that'll be from Joseph Barn, who was a colleague of George's.
Get unmuted here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just feeling very emotional about this event, and I'm really glad to be part of it and be part of this gathering. I feel it's been some time since we've seen each other, but I still feel like a member of the Hrbek family. I think I'll always feel that. And George and I did a lot of learning together. We were brothers together. This is why I'm glad that Kim from here too, so that I'm conscious of being a family reunion. And there's lots of other people who feel the same way. So I just want to say that how glad I am to be here, and how good to see you, George.
Good to see you, Joe. And as I mentioned before, he was a significant influence in my life, and I learned a lot from Joe. And we did have a lot of adventures together.
Yes, we did.
So he was a significant person in my growth.
And I see some people dropping things in the chats. Michelle Smith says, an important lesson I got from the reading is the importance of listening to the people in the community around you. I see that Vala says, and people can feel free to unmute themselves. But Vala says, what are some of the lessons from George's life that can help us feel, oh, never mind, she's repeating the question.
I think I personally find it easier to reflect when I can physically look at the question. So placing it there was very good for me. I think that the concept of listening is extremely important, but then kind of figuring out the way of taking that information that you've gleaned and putting it into action, using both the community that you've gleaned that knowledge from and also the community that you have wider access to because of your positioning within society. I thought that that was very useful and interesting.
Thank you, sister. Anyone else? What are the lessons from George's life that feel helpful for building movements today? And I see Melanie raising her hand.
Yeah. I think one of the lessons is that and I feel that George embodies this, that we are, all of us, without exception, works in progress. None of us has arrived, that the understanding where we stand in relation to systems of privilege and oppression is lifelong work, never done once and for all. Thanks for living that, George.
Amen to that. Any other thoughts?
We have a comment from Rebecca saying that something Mr. Hrbek said here tonight was something like, it's in the context of community that white people find the strength to be who they want to be. This reminds me that we need to that we need each other and need to gain the will and the skill to stay put with one another.
I think we all need to be like Moses. He never made it to the promised land, but he led them out of slavery, but he never got to the promised land. And we all need to see ourselves that, you know, we can't be looking for some kind of instant gratification in terms of the issue. I think we have just a responsibility and a calling, if you will, to participate in a struggle that's ongoing. This struggle began long before me, but we have the privilege, I've had the privilege of participating in this struggle, you know, in this country, as a citizen of this country. as a white person in this country, I've had the privilege of participating in the struggle. I may never see what I want to see and what I think ought to be, but I have the responsibility, nevertheless, of being part of that which may come to fruition long after I'm gone. And I think all of us have that responsibility.
And I think about the old 60s poster that said, bloom where you're planted. And that's exactly what you've done. I mean, and Lynn's done a good job of pointing that out. Wherever you've been, you have bloomed where you're planted. Wherever you've been, that's what you've done. And that's what we need to do. You know, here right now, we're working on voter ID. Everybody has something they can do right now. There's something in your life that you can recognize that needs to be changed or needs to be worked on. And we just need to get out there and not think so big, think small. Just think where you are and what you can do, because we can all do something, no matter, even during the pandemic. You know, there are things I can do from my house. There are things you can do on the phone. There are all kinds of things that we can do. He's done big things. We can do little things that get to be big things. So bloom where you're planted. That's what I've learned from my brother.
Mm.
And Melanie and Joe and everybody.
I'm curious what's coming up for other folks. I know there's some folks who haven't spoken yet, and I'm curious if we can maybe bring some of those voices into the room, if you would like to, of course.
My name is Tom Noon. I'm not owner, but I do own a computer, so that's why owner's on the computer.
I was wondering about that.
A couple of things struck me. Number one was the Chicago experience, where people came in and had those lively discussions. I would have liked to have been the fly on the wall for those discussions, George, because I think they were probably very vigorous at the time. And I think that's really the key, is discussion. I may not agree with you, but I'm certainly willing to listen to what you have to say. And if I can be helpful in pointing away, or if you can be helpful in pointing away from me, so much the better for us all. So I think discussion is necessary. And I think that's probably our biggest failing right now, is that we're talking past each other. We're not necessarily talking to each other. So locally here in Birmingham, I live not too far from Janet and Jean, and I have been harassing our local District 6 representative to the point where he won't talk to me anymore. But I focused on some of the articles that appear in the Birmingham News now, and challenging some writers that have certain opinions and inviting them to talk about stuff. But I think the problem is that so many people are set in their minds that they're not willing to budge whatever opinion that they have. And I think that's one of the failings that we have today. So, but I think the other thing too, George, is that the fact that you listened to people wherever you were, and you tried to discover what the issues were with them. And I think that's the key, is being able to listen to other people. You may not, again, agree, but the idea is, if you're willing to listen, you present a vulnerability, and I think that opens the door to fruitful discussion. So I think that's a very important key for us in the church to understand, to be able to do that. That it's not cut and dried. There are a lot of issues with 50 shades of gray in them. And in order to reach people, we've got to show our vulnerability, and we've got to be able to walk with them as far as we can walk, and advocate for them as far as we can advocate. And then we've got to find our course in terms of how we can make changes.
I'm going to go ahead and jump on that whole vulnerability thing since you brought it up. And George, I actually wanted to ask a question, and it's something that I deal with as somebody who works at a very liberal educational institution. I feel like I'm a good person, but I also want to know, how do you deal with, or how have you dealt with being afraid of being wrong, or of doing it wrong? I find that I'm so scared of doing things wrong, of offending somebody or hurting somebody, that I often don't say or do something when perhaps I should, because I just don't know how to do it, like quote unquote, the right way. So how have you dealt with that, or how do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, community is so important. So the question you're asking, or when you begin to question yourself, you've got to be able to do that kind of questioning and that kind of reflection and that kind of struggling within the context of a community of other people, because we have to find together what the common wisdom is, and we need to get feedback, critical feedback, helpful critical feedback in order to make those kinds of decisions. So community is extremely important. The second thing is, we should not be afraid of making mistakes. Which is one of the things that appealed to me when I first encountered Christianity through a Lutheran church. This whole concept of grace, the grace of God. It frees you because you're free to make a mistake. But the worst thing to happen is if you're paralyzed. You're so afraid of making a mistake, you don't do anything. So, you have to be free to make mistakes, but your mistakes are going to be minimal if you see yourself not as I, but as we, and that decisions are being done within the context of being with other people in community. That's my sermon for today.
Thank you.
I'd like to come in if I may.
Yeah, please, Joe.
This may have appeared to be a kind of nuance in George's story, but I think it's a very important point at the mansion particularly, but this was true wherever he went, especially at the mansion. And George may have grown in this just as I grew in this whole matter of making the liturgy and the worship on a Sunday morning, when you're with the body of Christ, we're supposed to be building each other up, strengthening one another, helping one another to know the way. But it's the sad reality is that there are, in so many congregations, racism is never mentioned, homophobia is never mentioned, voter suppression is not mentioned, poverty isn't mentioned hardly, and the causes of it, and mass incarceration never talked about, never raised up in the prayers and in the sermons. And that really is a serious weakness of the church in all denominations. It's true. It's such a personal focus on the relationship of a person to God and interpersonal relationships, but the issues of community, the issues of justice, just are not there, or if they are there, they're so general that people are not wrestling with these issues with each other. But as I see your work there in the mansion, George, you were really encouraging the students and the people who came, because they weren't all students. My brother, Dave, was not a student at that point. And they came open, and you definitely brought in hymns and songs and liturgies and discussions that matter, on things that matter. And that's a lesson that the whole church needs to learn.
George, I would be really curious. Oh, sorry, Janet, you have your hand up. I apologize.
Yeah.
It's actually Jean wanted to say something, my husband,
Wonderful.
about Chicago.
Yeah, this
Move up here.
move up here.
Yeah. Right there.
A part of this discussion spurred a memory that, or some memories that I had at the mansion with George and David. And we would go out in the day and come in the evening and do something like mowing the lawn or something. And we would not planned or anything, but we would get into what I now think is a pretty good stuff. And so anyway, we would, after it was all over, we'd go back in and we would kid with George. I don't know whether he ever fully accepted this or not, but we would tell him, we just preached your sermon. And he would pretty much cover the same topics that we had while mowing the grass. And that was a lovely memory that I had. And in spite of the fact that I don't come in back mow the grass, George's servants have gotten a lot better. But
It's what Tom was saying, that people talking to each other, David and George and Jean would get into these big theological discussions, social justice discussions, and they'd all be out there. You could just see them out there, all of them, sometimes cords standing out on necks, everybody wanting to get their word in or their discussion in about that, but they really listened to each other. The thing about it was, George always had the last word because the next day he had the sermon on it and he could get his point in really good, but he learned from them too. He would always incorporate that. So it was always great. The arguments, and George talks about my family. My family had arguments around that table. I grew up with all these discussions, grandparents, aunts, uncles. It was mostly the men in the kitchen. And the women were serving all the food. And those men would get into these great discussions. Well, then we moved it to our house and the women were allowed into the arguments. And whoa, we'd really get into it at the dinner table. I learned more about theology and about following Christ rather than believing in Christ at those discussions around the dinner table. And it's kind of sad that people really don't have that anymore. Everybody's sitting in front of the television, watching television while they're eating. But my father demanded that we sit at that table, nobody, for 30 minutes after we ate, you couldn't answer the phone, you couldn't do anything. We had those discussions. And it continued. It continues in my family. It continues in George's family. It continues with all you people, all of our friends. That's what we do. We sit around the table and we talk about these things, and they change us. They help us. They like Melanie was saying, it's a process. You're constantly growing and learning. And I think it starts in the home. You have to be carefully taught. You know, we need to remember that. Teach our children, start at home. And from there, you break out with all this. That's what George has done. And we, you know, with family, it started. That's my sermon.
Thank you, Janet. I want to make a comment myself, kind of ripping off of that, and then I'm going to lift up someone else's comment who doesn't have good Wi-Fi. Janet, what you just said about it starts with family, it also makes me think about how George at various points in his life is really good at creating a sense of family, you know, or creating a sense of community. Like it's so important for families to raise their children a certain way, but that, you know, when that doesn't happen, we still have the opportunity to, I really think of the power, especially of Melanie's words, which I quoted in the article, of how, you know, folks were showing up at the mansion feeling guilt, feeling ashamed, feeling embarrassed about the level of ignorance that they had. How could I not have known this? And there's a sense of family that George and Gert and the other members of the mansion were able to build there, where people felt safe exploring that, felt safe expressing that, and where they were held in that. So I think that so many times we white folks like don't necessarily have that family background, although those of us, I'm not a parent, but I know that there are folks in this room today who are parents and who are trying to raise white anti-racist kids. That doesn't always, we're not all lucky enough to have such parents, but we can create those spaces to hold people in exploring whatever it is that they need to explore. And that to me is one of the great powers of George Hrbek's story. And I wanted to lift up something that Amber Jeanson was wanting to say. She doesn't have good Wi-Fi, so I'm going to read a quote from her. She says, "I was deeply inspired by George's family and the discussions that occurred during parenting." And she is actually someone who I was referring to as raising children right now, raising anti-racist kids. As a parent, this is so important to me. Another part of the essay talked about how George didn't go to the March on Washington because it would take him away from the work he was doing in his community. Sometimes it's tempting to go to the bigger events, but the day-to-day work in and with our communities is so important. Thank you for this amazing discussion. I have so many gems to mull over. So once again, that's from Amber. Thank you for expressing that.
Lynn, just a correction, that was not the March on Washington.
Oh, that's
It was the journey across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to Montgomery.
yes.
And
yes.
my congregation wanted to pay my way to go to Selma when I was in Oklahoma. And I told them, no, that we had Selma right here in Oklahoma where we were. And that's where we needed that's where I needed to focus.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. We are coming to our close in just 10 or so minutes. I'm wondering if anyone has any burning thoughts, things that you want to express. And I want to turn it over to George at some point soon to share his closing reflections with us. I see Joe Ellwanger, do you have your hand raised, or is that, okay, so that was from a while ago.
I thought Melanie had her hand raised too.
I guess I just wanted to add another thought in terms of what the community was that I experienced at the mansion. And I think George has continued to do this, and I think probably a number of us on this screen have continued to provide space for people to doubt, provide space for people to wrestle, provide space for people to grieve, provide space for people to celebrate even the smallest breakthroughs. And so it doesn't have to be a religious ritual, but I felt like ritual was also ritual. Coming together to grieve, coming together to celebrate, and finding ways of giving expression to that, sometimes ritually, if that is a word that has meaning for you. Thanks.
Final thoughts, final questions? Yes, Mom, I see you.
I want to go back to, and I've forgotten your name, Mr. Owner of the computer, to a thought that you had about listening to others and the patience that it takes to listen and to find commonalities, even a small commonality that you can think of that joins you to that person in some way, and work from there. And it can take not a day or a week or 3 conversations, but years until you can find ways to actually communicate with one another about your hopes, your dreams, what you want for yourselves, for your children, for our nation. And I think that's one of the things that George was trying to do throughout his life.
Well, first of all, I like people. And I've always been fascinated
That
by
helps.
people. And I always want to know people's stories, you know, to hear other people's journeys. What do they struggle with? So it wasn't simply a technique. It was, I was personally interested in hearing and learning from other people. I mean, when I think about the mentors in my life, who were they? You know, it was the gas station attendant, black gas station attendant down in Selma. He was one of my mentors down there. I learned so much from him. And my dad especially encouraged me to do that, to get out, because he said, you're not going to get your education simply through the formal education system. You've got to get out. And it was because of him that I wound up doing all of the things I did, working with migrant laborers up in Wisconsin on a cattle ranch in North Dakota, and so on. So, you know, I thought I was enriched by so many other people. I counted a privilege to have encountered the people that I encountered and how they gifted me along the way. And that's an important thing, I think, for me to say. You know, this whole thing that Lynn did, and I want to say this about Lynn, it was such a delight. When he contacted me and said he wanted to interview me, I Googled him up to find out about he was telling me about his project, and I Googled him up and I looked at the list of people that he'd done these vignettes on, and I knew 4 of the people that he did, including Joe Wellman, that he did the vignettes on. And I was really attracted to, not attracted, I really thought his passion for that project was right where it needed to be, and I wanted to support it. So I agreed to be interviewed. I agreed to be interviewed by him. I did not realize it would turn out to be 22 hours or whatever it was, but those were 22 rich hours, because he interviewed me in a way that nobody else ever did. He forced me to think about what some of these experiences meant to me, how they changed me. He taught me, he forced me to reflect on some things that I had never reflected on before. And so it was just, I look forward to those sessions with Lynn. He's another person who gifted me. And so if I were going to talk about my journey, I think about all the people along the way that I had the privilege of sharing a slice of life with, and how much they added to the richness of my own life and to my own understanding and to my own growth as a human being. And that's what's important. I never felt, that I should be singled out in any way, because I was never involved simply as a lone wolf on anything that I did. I was always part of a community that was doing something. I may have had a kind of a leadership role in some of those things, and some of those other things I was just a participant in. But it was always within the context of community, and always in a situation in which I was really being gifted by so many other people. And so my life has been kind of an evolution along the way. And I think about how naive I was in Selma. I was really naive. People say you were so courageous. No, I wasn't. I was young. I was naive. I was immortal. So the journey has really been a great journey, and it's because it's been always with others, always sharing life and the struggle with others. And that's why community is so important. And I'm grateful for the fact that I've always, Martin Luther King talked about the beloved community, and I figured my life has been a whole journey within a beloved community. And so I'm really blessed.
George, I was about to ask you I was about to turn it over to you to give some closing reflections, and I feel like you've already begun to do that. But I wanted to say, I want to do that in a second, but George has told me probably 3 or 4 times that the interviews that we've done together have allowed him to reflect on his life in deeper ways than he's done before. And hearing someone who has lived George's life say that, someone who's had such a rich life full of reflection, feels, for me as a writer, it feels really profound for someone to say that to you. And that, to me, hearing anyone say that, but hearing George, specifically say that has been a deeply moving part of my own journey, talking with him and interviewing him. So I feel like he's experienced these interviews as a blessing in a way, and so have I. And this is actually the first time that I've done such a deep dive interview process. And it's very intense. It's a lot of work. And it's also very, very rich at a level of getting to know someone, getting to care for someone. And discovering what my work means to someone else, and in a way that where they feel moved by what I'm doing as I'm telling their own story. That feels it's emotional, it's spiritual, and the whole process has been a blessing for me. So I want to turn it over to you, George, given that we're pretty much out of time. Do you have any closing reflections that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I wish I could sit down with everybody that I haven't met so far, because I think you all have something to share with me. And I'm really thankful for my family. I'm really thankful for my partner here, Stephanie. And I think about the fact that I've been always rooted in family, in community. And that's what we all ought to aspire to. Sometimes we ask, what can I do? And I think that possibly one of the things we ought to do is explore what others are already doing in the community, and finding a way perhaps to link up with them and to begin to search and look and have the experience of being in community, doing some things together, and not simply feeling that we've got to do it on our own. Because we really need the encouragement. We need that space where we can be open and honest and share our struggles and share with each other whatever wisdom we've got, whatever our experience has been, what we can learn from each other, and collectively then decide if we want to do it together. Nobody's a lone wolf in this struggle. Can't be. We've got to be in it together. We have to be in it together.
Thank you so much. I'm wondering,
But
George, do you have
I want to say it's been, I almost feel like some of the things that people have said to me that from now on you ought to call me Saint George.
and how do you feel about that?
I feel embarrassed.
George, you had mentioned that you might want some of the people who you have collaborated with over the years and your friends and your family who are here, that you might want some of those folks to stick around for, if they can, for a little while after our meeting. Is that something that you would like to do?
Okay, anybody who wants to stick around, if we can continue, fine. I'm here out in this beautiful place right off Lake Michigan, and I've got no place to go except bed.
Tell you what then, why don't we close this out officially for the night, and folks who want to stick around for another 15 minutes, for another 20 minutes, please stick around, continue to talk with George. And if you're not going to stick around, just thank you so much for showing up tonight. And yeah, it's been a pleasure hosting this gathering. I see some hearts from Rebecca, hearts from Michelle. Thank you, thank you.
Hey, Lynn,
Yes.
Stephanie here.
Yes.
How can we support the important work you're doing? Not only in this remarkable chef d'oeuvre, I like to call it, masterpiece, but I know that this is your life's work in a number of arenas. And I would want people to just have an opportunity. Are there obvious ways that we can support you before we just say goodbye?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just dropped, so this project is funded by the grassroots. I just dropped a GoFundMe for it. That's something that, you know, to talk about what that's going to be doing. My hope is to write about many more people like George. And I feel very blessed in my life to be connected with many deeply inspiring white anti-racist elders like George, whose life has just many lessons and inspirations to help white folks who are navigating their way through the movement today. And I'm also building a collection called 101 Examples of White Anti-Racism in US History. And that's going to be a short collection of 1 to 2 page pieces that I hope introduces white people across the country to the wide range of people who have shown up of white people who have shown up for racial justice, and hopefully helps them find their own place in that. So if that's something that you feel that you'd want to contribute to, of course, you know, that would be lovely. But my hope is that people share the GoFundMe widely with their own racial justice communities. And I think that if it's shared widely, hopefully enough people get eyes on it that it gets the kind of support that it needs. So Steph, I appreciate you lifting that up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, do we have access to that GoFund? I haven't seen it, I don't guess.
I dropped it in the chat. I'm going to drop it in the chat one more time. And yeah, feel free to open it up before the meeting ends. But with that said, feel free to stick around and we can all continue the chat for a little while.
Okay.
Good, George.
Bill, thank you for
Bill.
showing up, Bill. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bill is a friend of my mother's and has known some pretty inspiring folks who I might even write about as part of this project. So Bill, I would love to chat more. Oh, I think Bill, I think you're muted right now.
He is muted.
Well, I see my daughter. She's still here. You're muted, Kim.
Oh, Kim, how nice to meet you.
How nice to meet you, Lynn. It's been such a joy to hear about the process and to have my dad fill me in every week about how things were moving and just how dear your interviews were to him. And to me too, to hear these stories again so cohesively, you know, because I grew up with them, but I was young. So a lot of stuff I didn't pay attention to, but the family stuff certainly is huge. And I watched my grandkids. I have a 15-year-old granddaughter, and when she was 10, she'd sit around the table with all of us and say, I am so sick of you guys talking about politics. And when she was 12, she wanted to go to all the marches and said, I am so thankful for my family, that you guys are my family. She said, and I don't believe everything that you tell me. She said, I do my own research, and I am really glad that I have you guys and I can have my voice.
Yeah.
And I think Mike wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say, you know, it's just wonderful to see you, Janet and Jean. You're front and center on my screen right now, so hi. And Melanie and Joe, who I haven't seen in a long time. But I was introduced to George by Saint Dick Searing, and it was a time when George and Dick were able to approach things powerfully with authenticity. And the struggle for me now is that we seem to be in an era that is post-authentic. And I struggle to understand what the messaging is that we can capture going forward to regain the high ground, because I feel like it's been lost in a sense.
Okay.
Who wants to answer that question?
I have some thoughts about it, but Charles, I think, is about to win.
Yeah, I just I'm having to boogie away. I really do want to say to Melanie Morrison, I'm in the process of doing my own memoirs, and I would love to talk with you about the Chicago experience, you know, that we had together. So
Yes.
I'll get in touch
Okay.
with you through somebody.
Wonderful,
Okay.
wonderful. It's
All
wonderful to
right.
see you.
That's
Okay.
my sister. I can help.
Thanks, Charles.
All right.
I'm so glad to hear that you're writing,
Yeah.
that you are going to do that about your life story and all that you, yes, so wonderful, great. I look forward to talking with you.
Same. All right. Good night to all, and I'll talk with you when we do it again.
See you, Charles.
Good night,
All
Mississippi.
right.
I've got to go too, George, but it's good to see you. And you too, Stephanie. And
Great to see
Joe,
you, Joe.
really
Yeah.
good to see you. You're still at it, Joe.
you're still at it,
You're
at it.
still at it.
What a joy to see you, Joe Barnes.
It's good to see you too, Kim.
Joe, yeah, and
Joe, when
thank
is
you,
there-
Joe, for all you have done for this world.
Melanie.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
great to be on the same program with you all. Linda, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, looking forward to talking more with you too, Joe. And when's your next book coming out? You're working on another book right now.
Yeah, it'll be out around the beginning of the next year.
Okay. All right. Hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Night, Joe.
Night, Joe.
Night, Joe.
Our group is shrinking, but we still got some folks.
Well, it almost looks like a family gathering here. But we want to welcome you both, Michelle, and you, owner, into the family.
Oh, okay. I got to say something about Michelle here. I have known Michelle since I think I was 5, and what, you were 3?
Younger.
Younger, 4. How old were you?
2 and 3, Lynn.
We grew up together. So she and her brother are my oldest childhood friends, and we're all still very, very close.
Wow, great.
This is amazing. What you put together is I'm glad to be part of this in some small way. So
Well, do y'all live near each other, Michelle? You and Lynn?
I'm in
Or-
San Jose and yeah, in California. And then Lynn's up a ways north of me. So
Yeah, we live about an hour away. We live at different sides of the Bay Area, but we grew up in the same neighborhood.
That you've kept up with each other all these years?
yeah.
How nice.
Yeah,
Aw.
yeah.
So good to see you, Jean.
Me?
Yeah,
Yes.
Melanie's talking to you.
Thank you, Melanie. Good seeing you.
Yes.
It really,
We're gonna walk up right outside and shake hands, are we? I haven't done any of these things before. This is amazing to me. Where are you?
So I want to circle back to something. Mike, you had brought up a really interesting question, and George had suggested that maybe we talk about it a little bit. And now I'm finding myself having trouble remembering what the question was, but it was something about authenticity and messaging. And I don't know if we want to revisit that again.
Right. One of the things that was so powerful about the epoch in which George was doing his work was he was able to connect with the community and bring a sense of authenticity to the struggle. And it seems as though, at least politically, authenticity no longer matters. Truth no longer matters. And so I struggle with what the messaging and the effort is going forward in this sort of post-authentic era. I mean, I still do my work, and it's based on the law and on facts. But the larger issues seem to be held sway to inauthenticity. And I just struggle with how we counter that going forward with this sort of movement.
I'd be curious to hear what other people think, but I feel like my project is trying to get at this in some small way. And of course, we have to work on it from so many different angles. I mean, I think that, you know, when I think about, you know, what I'm trying to do with my stories about white anti-racist history is tell stories of people who have lived rich lives, rich anti-racist lives that are very sincere, that are very authentic, to explore them emotionally, to explore people's growing process. And hopefully, I don't see that as like a big political messaging thing, but hopefully present some resources for white people who are trying to walk this kind of anti-racist journey right now, to consider what that looks like for them. I feel like, you know, whenever we have moments like George Floyd is murdered, or we have a Ferguson uprising, whenever we have these moments, I feel like there are always these viral articles that go around that are like, here's a list of things that you could do. You can donate to a bail fund, you can start a discussion group, you can do this, that, and the other thing. And I think that that's good and that's helpful, but I think that we also need deeper ways for people in those moments, for white folks in those moments, to really reflect on what it actually means to live an anti-racist life, and to live an anti-racist life that they would enjoy living, you know, to have portrayals of a life that feels really, really rich and really compelling. So I feel like I'm trying to make my own small contribution to, once again, it's not political messaging, but to trying to put narratives out there that feel helpful. And I know that, just to speak for my own life, I do get sometimes sucked too much into the news or sucked too much into Facebook. And for me, part of what I need to do is spend more time with actual community, having actual conversations, so that I'm not consuming a lot of the problems that I feel like you're pointing to, with there being a lack of authenticity, or there being a lot of disinformation.
If I can, George, this is Tom Noon. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. You and I have just kind of crossed paths from time to time,
I
doing
know that, Tom.
whatever.
Right.
I think one of the issues, and again, the underlying matter of racism is a series of lies. And I think part of our responsibility is to continue to expose the lie. If we fail to do that, then we have failed ourselves and our society. And I feel that that's the biggest juncture right now, is that those who want to continue the lie and those who want to expose the lie. I think that's our ongoing challenge, is to fight the lie with the truth, understand what the truth is, be able to speak that truth. As Jesus would say, speak it in love, but speak it and don't stop speaking it.
Yeah, amen, brother. That's really the truth. And it's really more than half of people want facts, want truth. I mean, I still think it's that people want facts. I do Facebook all the time, and all my Facebook does is go to those places, all the fact checking places. And I started out just fact checking for the 2 years ago, and it grew so much that people are actually sending me things now before they put it out. My classmates that were putting out all kinds of lies and junk, they send it to me now. They'll say, Janet, check this before I put it out. And, I don't even tell them, you fact check it. I mean, it's almost become a ministry to me. I fact check all the time. I say, if you find anything on my Facebook that's not true, let me know and I will take it back. But I'm a fact checker, and I'm amazed at the people that want facts. I tend to be more positive than negative, and I see more people that really want the truth, people that we're surrounded with here in Birmingham, Alabama. That's what we do. We sit around our table and we talk about these things. And the people I know want facts. They really do. I don't know who all these people are that are Trumpers, really. And they're the people that want to believe the lies. They really want to believe them. And I do know some of these people. And, some people facts won't make any difference, but there are a lot of people that facts do make a difference. So I just keep plugging along with my facts and just hope for the best.
Well, it seems to me that the question of lies emerged with Trump. So we begin to experience lies in a different way. But where I've started was to recognize that I was part of the lie, and that I've benefited from the lie.
There you go.
I've been privileged by the lie. So, there are lies and there is a lie.
Yep.
And racism is an expression of the lie that's impacted all of us. We're not simply talking about those who have suffered the most because of the lie, but we're talking about also the price that we who have benefited from the lie and are part of the lie have also missed out.
Yes.
We've also missed out.
Yes. Thank you.
And it seems to me authenticity, Mike, has to do with, first of all, recognizing that. And it's a question of how do we deal with that then? How do we deal with it? It's not that we're going to be burdened by a lot of guilt or immobilized by guilt, but recognizing that ought to be our way of dealing with what is the rooted lie in our culture and in our country. And how do we root it out? Because Trump and those lies he's telling are simply are expressions of the big lie.
I want to jump in and say that I believe there's been a battle around the narrative of this country for hundreds of years. We're experiencing it again, a revival of it, and now in certain form, critical race theory and so forth. But that narrative battle has always been here. And I don't recognize in my 72 years that there was a time of authenticity any more than I think it is now, Mike. I have had the privilege of working with phenomenal 30-year-olds, 30-year-old activists, anti-racist activists, and they are doing such incredible work. And I think all I have to think about is the people I know who are rebuilding Detroit. It's and the activists there, some of whom are white for sure. And I mean, I draw heart and hope from the work of young activists right now. I'm not sure that's responding to what you what you
No,
were.
it actually, Melanie, it very much is, and I appreciate that.
All right.
So thank you.
Okay.
I often get focused on winning the struggle rather than struggling.
I understand.
The authenticity is in the struggle, right?
Yeah.
And it's got to be we.
Yeah.
And there's some good stories out there. You know, my daughter went to jail for the first time, and the judge said to these 10 women that went to jail overnight, he said, wear this arrest as a badge of honor. He said, I'm proud of you, even though he fined them $10. They were guilty, but he said, wear it as a badge of honor. Now that's a judge here in Montgomery, Alabama saying that. So there are stories of people that are doing things and changing things.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
And all you have to do, talk about lies, all you have to do is read Alabama history books that are taught in the 4th grade and 9th grade. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's just one big lie that's been perpetrated my whole life.
Yep.
Yeah, so those things are being revised and challenged, and people are at least talking about some of these things, and they're talking about the 2 Americas that we live in, and talking to people in that other America. I just say, talk to somebody in the other America. Don't talk to me. Talk to them. I know what that other America is like. Hear their stories. They'll tell you stories about that other America. Sure, our America.
I think we've got to raise up these stories of hope to one another. I really, that's a conviction of mine, because John C. Calhoun has been removed from Charleston.
Right.
That is not nothing. That is huge. Well, like, I mean, we've got, I had the, forgive me if I'm sounding immodest here, but I had the opportunity 3 years ago to do a book tour. And I got to go to all these different cities and meet phenomenal human beings who are doing incredible work in their local communities. People I'd not heard of. I mean, there is leaven at work, there is hope at work, there is change at work in this country. And I think we give our power away when we focus so much on Trump and Trumpsters and so forth. I mean, there's good news.
Oh, there he is. And there's Lynn.
I want to welcome some new people into the room. Fred, are you with Ann?
No, I'm with a friend who's a retired Lutheran minister who's visiting. I sent him George's piece, and he is full of curiosity.
Wonderful. So you guys are
Tom Chittick.
You guys are coming in as we're probably just going to be here for another 15 or 20 minutes. Or I don't know how long. But Fred, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm echoing. Do I sound okay on?
You're fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fred Jealous is the father of Lynn Jealous, who's the former president of NAACP, so it's an honor to have Fred here. And I would love to just create an opportunity for the two of you to talk with George for a second and to introduce.
Yeah, and I apologize for being late. I didn't know what the time was. And he's visiting, and I just said, oh, it's close to time. I was wrong. Tom, sit down.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, and thank you for doing this.
I'm chilly. Better late than never.
Tom, the floor is yours if you wanted to ask George a question or express some thoughts.
Well, I loved reading the piece about you. It's a puzzle to me for all my years as a Lutheran minister that I was not aware of your career, your ministry. And it was a delight to read.
Excuse me, I'm just checking.
And you remind me of all the rebels in the Missouri Synod that held the church to the gospel.
Well, I came out of Missouri.
You what?
I came out of Missouri.
When did you come out?
Oh, I left in the 70s. I left Missouri in the 70s.
Okay.
The mid 70s.
Yeah.
If you want to
Yeah.
tonight, is the question.
But you know what we used to say, that the United Lutheran Church wanted to be like General Motors, and the Missouri Synod wanted to go back to the 16th century.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But you're right. There were a lot of, I think about that, and I think some of the more radical Lutherans, not only clergy but also clergy, came out of Missouri, and I think it was a reaction to the dogmatism and the strictures, the purity.
Yeah.
Rules
that
of the Missouri Synod.
That word purity is a bugaboo, isn't it?
Where were you pastor?
I was a campus minister most of my career. I knew Gus Schultz when he was in Palo Alto.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But
I know Gus.
Yeah. Yeah. As he was our favorite neo-Marxist.
Yeah, he was in the campus ministry, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So my first post was at Yale when William Sloane Coffin was the university chaplain.
Oh, Melanie, you went to Yale, didn't you? Yeah.
That was just before my time.
Uh-huh.
When William Sloane Coffin was there. Yeah.
Yeah. And my last post was at Harvard, University Lutheran Church is a parish-based campus ministry.
Okay.
And I was there for 10 years.
Which branch of Lutheranism did you come out of?
Well, initially I was a happy Dane.
Okay.
As distinct from the Holy Danes. But that was a real thing. It was a real thing. Yeah. But anyway, we all ended up in the LCA and then eventually, of course, in the ELCA.
Right.
Yep.
We went back and forth.
So, Tom, I'm kind of curious, since we're going to be closing out soon, were there any things that came up for you in the story that you wanted to share with George that felt important for you to lift up or maybe ask him about? Sorry to put you on the spot.
You caught me off guard. You caught me off guard. Yeah, no. I just love the article. It was a fabulous article. Yeah.
How did you happen to find the article? Who gave it to you?
Fred did.
Okay.
Fred, there he
Yeah,
is.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who knows?
I think the anti-racism effort and work that we're all engaged in some fashion, your ministry focused on changing white people. And I just think that's where so much of the work has to be.
Right.
In the old days, in the ELCA or in the LCA, there was some notion that somehow we're supposed to be integrating our congregations. And I think it missed the mark. It didn't get at changing the social fabric, getting at laws, getting at redlining and the like.
Well, it was interesting. Integrating the church always had to do with blacks coming into white churches.
Exactly.
We wanted to integrate, let the whites go into the black churches.
I woke up to that 10 years ago and said, wait a minute, how did I miss that one? Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
You may have been caught off guard, but that was a great insight. Thank you.
So you are now 90, is that right?
Yes.
90.
Right.
And
I don't know why. My dad did tell us kids that we hit the genetic jackpot and we should take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
But I didn't follow my dad's advice. I didn't take very good care of myself, and I still made it to 90.
Well, I wish you peace. Peace on your house. Peace on you.
Same. Peace for all of us.
Yeah, indeed.
George, I wish that you could shoot 90 on the golf course.
I used to be able to do that, but no more, Mike. I'm just happy to be out there still occasionally swinging a club.
George, all this time, I didn't know that you golfed at all.
Yeah, I went, in fact, it was some of the minority group in New Orleans in that congregation that when we were in the middle of all that difficulty, I had never golfed before. They gave me a new set of golf clubs. So I thought I'd have to try it out.
That's before they kicked him out of the parsonage.
Yeah, right. Well, this was the 10% in that congregation, not the 90%.
Yeah, George and I used to golf at 6 o'clock in the morning in Cleveland in the 70s.
You have to have golf orgies.
And he always let me win. That's why I let him. I was happy for him to become my son-in-law.
Here we are a half an hour after we officially wrapped up, and we have another person who just joined us. Cynthia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Cynthia. Hi, Cynthia. She might still be plugging in.
She's muted, yeah.
George, I want to say something. I think I alluded to this when Lynn was interviewing me, but Paul's testimony about the Apostle Paul's testimony about faith, hope, love, abide.
Right.
And he says the greatest of these is love. Well, for me, the greatest of these in the mansion was hope. I appreciate what you say about grace being so important to you, but I think you've echoed that tonight when you say you won't get to the promised land, but you will carry on. And I think about the beautiful rewriting that Pete Seeger did of Jacob's ladder. And when he says the struggle's long, but hope is longer.
Yeah.
And that is what I experienced there and continue to experience. So thanks for that, George. I'm going to say good night.
Good night, Melanie. We'll see you soon.
Seeing all of you.
We'll be looking for the great release event.
Well, thank you. And Lynn, again, thank you for the work you do and for this evening and for the portrait. Good night.
Bye, Melanie.
Melanie, let me ask you one thing. Do you remember in Chicago when we would all get together and have a party I mean, we would
Yeah.
have a gathering and it'd be a party. People would
Yes.
drink and talk and
Yes,
just
there was
make
always
the-
music also. We have
Always
not
music.
talked about the importance of music tonight. Yes,
And
excuse me.
sometimes at the end, George would get everybody together. Of course, we're Episcopalian now, and we really guard the rail. But George would get everybody together, and we would have communion together.
Uh-huh.
And I always loved that because that was the real meaning of communion to me, to bring everybody together at the end. Do you remember that? And that was so important as far as bringing the group together.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that we had experienced that. We did a lot of that while we were in Chicago that month. That month changed us. It radicalized us. We came back to Alabama after that month.
So glad it did.
I know. And it really, really.
So many
moved
people have benefited from your radicalization. So, all right.
That was
Good
a
to see
wonderful month. It was good to see you in April.
So
Hey, Melanie.
just to add a quick third-party witness, a couple of weeks ago, Kim and I went to my 50th college reunion. And one of the guys there was actually my high school roommate at Concordia Academy in St. Paul. He went on to become a bishop in the ELCA.
Graduated Seminex.
And graduated Seminex. And when I introduced him to Kim and reminded him about the mansion, he said that the mansion was a life-changing event in his life. And I think that was a powerful witness.
He spent 2 weeks.
Yeah, he spent 2 weeks there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, I mean, that's the legacy for me, is to see what people who are at the mansion. Some of them just came maybe for a week or 2 weeks. Some of them were really part of the community, and to see what they've done, you know, vocationally in their calling, and how they were impacted by that experience at the mansion, it really shaped what they were doing.
Yeah, George, I don't know. It's probably not possible that you would remember the name Steve Belzer.
No, we talked about it.
Oh.
No, so many people came through the mansion. I remember probably about 20%.
Tell that story about.
You know, there is another story that some of you probably haven't heard.
Oh.
When I was at Concordia Senior College in Fort Wayne, this would have been like 1970. There was
69.
What?
69.
69. Okay. You know, there's this Arrow Saarinen Chapel at Concordia Fort Wayne. I don't even know if the place exists anymore, but it's this sort of architectural wonder. And the campus was, you know, we had like 600 people there who were aiming to go to either Springfield or St. Louis. And there was this announcement that George Hrbek was going to be preaching at a chapel service. And it was astonishing because the chapel was filled like I had never seen it filled before. There was no sitting room. There was not even any standing room. And in marched the processional with all of the people bearing the candles and everything like that. And everyone was vested. And in walks George in blue jeans and a blue jean jacket. And everyone was astonished to hear him speak. And I actually misspoke before because I said that St. Dick Searing had introduced me to George, but I actually was introduced to George, although indirectly, at 1969 during that chapel ceremony. It was a pretty astonishing moment. And I think very influential for me and my classmates, the people I knew. Cool minute.
Wonderful. That wonderful to hear. Yeah.
That was the sadistic side of me that came out in that chapel service.
Oh. Oh gosh, well, I have to get going, but thank you so much.
All right, love you, Michelle.
Well,
Nice
thank
to
you
meet
all.
you.
Thank you all. And Michelle, nice to meet you.
You too.
All right.
You got a great spirit.
Hey, wait, Tom. Hey,
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
Are you retired now, or are you preaching like?
No, I'm retired.
Still, or
I'm
do
retired,
you? But what, you give lectures on Kierkegaard?
I have done that, yeah.
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 Uh-huh.
And Nikolai Grundtvig,
Yeah.
yeah, the Danish social reformer, yeah.
Well, of course, George is 90 and he still preaches.
Yeah.
So
Every day.
Every day.
Stephanie sits at my feet and listens.
No, notice I'm standing. I'm standing over. I have no place at the table. I'm not sure what this metaphor is here, but I can't get.
George and Stephanie are in a, what do you call it, a cabin? Or you?
Yes, our family cabin, yeah, 67-year-old family cabin.
Truman Sinai. Her dad's name was Truman, and he and his wife built this cabin, and they named it Truman's Sinai.
Actually, it was named by a Jewish friend who came and spent a weekend
okay.
here.
That's
And
how
he
it goes.
painted the sign and put it up.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's good to see you, Kim.
yeah.
Good, even it's good to see you, Mike.
Kim, I can't believe y'all have a 15-year-old granddaughter. We do too.
I know, is that ridiculous?
We should be having great
see all of you.
grandchildren.
Hey, George, here's your
grandchildren.
George, here's your grandson.
On Zoom.
Huh?
Hello, hello.
Hey, Josh.
Oh my gosh, I love all the
Hi.
pictures of them. Oh, it's so great. I love your pictures on Facebook.
That's my grandson, Nurse Joshua.
Yep, and actually, George, here's your great granddaughter.
Let's see.
Well, I don't know how great she is, but
Come over, Hannah. Get in
here she
there.
is.
Wow.
Oh.
Hi, Hannah.
This is the one who told us she hated us talking politics all the time.
So pretty. Oh, Hannah, you're so
Wow.
pretty. We've got to get our family together more on Zoom. Let's do
Hey,
that.
Lynn, I think
Absolutely.
you've got a hotel going here with a family reunion.
No, Lynn got us all together.
That's my Aunt Janet.
Great. Aw.
Hannah, good to see
She
you.
just came home from practicing for playing in the pit band for Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Great.
What did you play? What instrument?
I play the trombone.
Oh, I love
A
trombone.
trombone player. And does she play it?
Mm-hmm.
George played the clarinet.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
Lynn, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Lynn.
Lynn.
Lynn, we'll be in touch.
Good seeing
huh?
y'all.
Sounds good, George.
Bye, Lynn.
All right. Thank you all so much
Thanks.
for coming
Love you
tonight.
guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Stayed up so late on
Bye.
the-
See ya.
So pleased
ya.
to meet you, Lynn. Thank you.
Here. Thank you, Tim. Good to meet you.
What? Eugene?
And my
Hey, it's just you and me now. We're just us.
I was afraid it wasn't going to end for you.
Well, whatever you've got up your sleeve next, let me know.
Yeah, well, I got an infinite amount of ideas up my sleeve, and I think what I'm gonna, yeah, what I've reached out to a couple chapters of Surge that are fairly local to you, and I would love to do some workshops specifically with some people in your area, and some people with Chicago. So that's one thing I'm thinking of, but I haven't heard back from folks yet. Yeah, and then I'm just going to start plugging away on those 101 examples of white anti-racism that you saw the beginning of that. That's what's up with me.
With our 2-hour sessions.
Yeah, well, we can continue to talk, and I emailed this to Stephanie, but I have a bunch of great material from you in terms of your thinking about the world today that I would love to have some follow-up interview to this story about your thinking today. So maybe we could have another some more sessions and we could continue to.
Fine. I'm available. At 90, I'm available.
Well, I hope that both of you really enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
And I hope you get support for all this work you're doing, and we'll keep continuing to spread the word.
I appreciate
Share
it.
the stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good night.
All right. Have a good night, whatever's left of it. Take care.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, George.